maybe the best place to start is to think about motivation. Why would you want to influence policymakers? And in many ways, I think that for a lot of us is obvious. To quote Marx, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. And for me, certainly, that is the motivation. Looking at the kind of urgent, immediate injustices in the world. The reason I got interested in research, the reason that I enjoy the work I do, is very much about trying to contribute to meaningful social change. Um, I work on refugee and migration crises, so in some ways it's extremely obvious how the work I do has policy relevance. Although it's worth saying that it's really only been in the last year or two that the space for that policy discussion has really opened up as governments are becoming increasingly worried about the impact of the Syria crisis at home. So moving very quickly on, what are the opportunities? First, I think is relevance. For me, that's a big part of what I want my research to be is relevant. And there's certainly no doubt that talking to policymakers provides an immediate confirmation of that. The second, I think, is engagement. I think it's really important to learn to talk beyond the academy, to avoid the introspection. It's very easy to talk in a seminar room with 30 or 40 people who broadly already understand the debates that you're talking about, probably have already reached similar conclusions to those that you have. The third part, which I think is related, is this idea of, being able to put your ideas into action. Policymakers are often funders. Funders have resources to put social science into action. So your great idea about how the justice system could function better, how you might be able to improve refugee resettlement, if you can persuade a policymaker, you can actually often move from really writing about this to actually having the money to put a pilot project together, to try out new initiatives. And that, I think, has to be the biggest opportunity that engaging with policymakers really offers. The difficulties, however, are probably even more significant. The first is who's setting the agenda. There's reasons why policymakers want to listen to particular types of research. Especially when research is being funded by policymakers, there's certainly a question about how independent it can be and about whether, in effect, the questions you're asking and perhaps even the answers you're giving are being conditioned and being framed by the expectation that they have to be received well by the policymakers. And you can certainly see this in some of the more policy-focused refugee research, which really is being dictated by priorities in government, or alternatively by those trying to lobby government in very particular directions. And I think, equally the kind of the recent plans of the UK government to actually add anti-lobbying provisions to a lot of the funding it provides another example of how tricky it can be to engage with policymakers in a way that actually reaffirms the independence of your research. Second is, do you ask unexpected questions if you're basically just trying to talk to an existing policy debate? There's a great piece by Oliver Bakewell talking particularly about this in relation to refugee and migration studies, where he talks about the value of policy-irrelevant research. If research is about discovering the unknown, about questioning received wisdom, how do you do that if you're basically just writing a technical piece that is talking to existing political and policy understandings? Where's the real creativity in that? And I think there's a general danger that research is becoming often overly technical, overly niche. I think the answer is perhaps twofold. The first is to not just blindly pursue policy relevance or policy debates, but to wait for the right moment when your research actually fits into that space. When there's a crisis, when there's a change of government, there are moments where research can be better received than at other points by policymakers directly. And the second part is to actually engage in that process, provide that public policy space through building activist and alliances with other groups building that policy space first by public engagement, by talking to the people that matter, by persuading general public opinion. And in that way, you can actually build a policy space to then go in with your idea and sit at the table without just becoming another seat. Because fundamentally, if you're trying to challenge power, you aren't going to do that just by turning up. You're going to become co-opted. For some people, that may be something they're more comfortable with, change at the margins. But I think if you are interested in really challenging the structural injustices that we see, it's important to recognize that it won't happen without first engaging in a much broader discussion in all sorts of different forums and not just round a policy table. So hopefully this was useful, and look forward to hearing the outcome of your discussions. Bye for now.